Okay, my loves. I know there are a lot of you that are out there that are really wondering, how do I even set boundaries anymore? Maybe you didn't grow up with great boundaries. Maybe boundaries weren't really modeled well for you, or maybe you were told that you cannot have boundaries. Maybe you're tired of being gaslighted in your relationships, and you're tired of feeling crazy all the time and guilty for trying to make a difference in your life. If this is you, then I want you to come schedule a call with me. Let's chat about the Unashamed Image Program. The Unashamed Image Program is geared towards you specifically. I am going to be helping you in our next upcoming session of the Unashamed Image. I am personally going to train you how to not feel crazy when someone is gaslighting you, how to be able to stand your ground, to keep your boundaries intact, and to also see through the bull crap. I am also going to be teaching you how to set really confident boundaries that you can really rely on. And I'm going to help you communicate them in a way that really makes sense. Basically, I'm going to help you live a life free of shame and on your terms. If you are ready and you are done feeling all the shame and guilt for trying to set boundaries, if you are not willing to live another moment the way you are right now and in somebody else's shadow, then this is the time to schedule that call with me. It's completely free, no pressure, just love, just support. Go to www.erinandersonthetraumacoach.com. Scroll down the page to where it says, Let's Chat About Working Together. Click on that button and it'll take you to my booking page. If you're ready to live the unashamed life, schedule that call. Let's get you in the Unashamed Image Program, my loves. From my heart to your heart. Bye. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Other Side of the Struggle by Erin Anderson Betrayal Trauma Coaching. I'm Erin Anderson, your host. If you're just joining this podcast, we talk about how I healed from my betrayal trauma and some of the things I've learned along the way as I continue to heal and as I coach other men and women through their traumas. Now, before we dive into this week's episode, let me tell you a little bit about how you can contact me. I have a few free Facebook groups. One of the groups are for women who are going through betrayal trauma due to a husband's addiction. In this group, women are able to voice how they feel about the struggle they are going through with the addiction, find a camaraderie of other women going through similar situations, get some detailed coaching from me, plus any other events or offers that I have going on. You can find me there at www.facebook.com/groups/the other side of the struggle. Or if you're looking for a place where you and your spouse can connect, have other really brilliant minds and coaches, therapists alike, I have some great colleagues that you can chat with as well as me in the group Positive Healing for LDS Marriages and Relationships, www.facebook.com/groups/Positive Healing for LDS Marriages and Relationships. I also have a Facebook page, www.facebook.com/BetterThanTheBetrayal. You can also find me on Erin Anderson Betrayal Trauma Coach on Instagram, or you can also find me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/Erin-the Trauma Coach. So, I have been promising a gift for a while for my listeners. It's ready to give away. I'm so excited. If you are ready to understand how your trauma is actually a building block to how amazing you are, not the wrecking ball, then download my free Heart of Gold meditation. In this meditation, it will take you through a deeper understanding of how a difficult trauma can help you realize how strong you are. All of those pieces of your heart that are broken because of the trauma and because of the pain you have gone through are actually being healed together by gold. So, this is also one of my first meditations that I ever went through to regain my self-confidence, to understand how amazing I truly am, and how each one of the things that happen in my life, whether good or bad, are things that are shaping me for who I truly am and helping me see my mission and purpose and live my paradise life. So if you would like that, and if you want to gain a deep love and appreciation for yourself, then this meditation is just for you. And when you realize that the heart beating inside of your chest is truly an inspiration that is guiding your life and helping you build your paradise life with self-confidence that's difficult to shake, I think you will love this freebie. So go and download it at https://erinanderson.kartra.com/page/heart of gold. And don't worry, I will make sure to link that in the description below. With that, let's dive into this week's episode. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Other Side of the Struggle. Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm super excited to introduce this week's guest speaker to you. She's my good friend and mentor, Jenny Layton. She's here to talk to us about the organization boundary, and we'll get into kind of what the organization boundary is here in just a second, but I want to introduce Jenny to you. She has been an organizer, a professional organizer since 2006, and in 2012 she started her company, thehappygal.com, where she coaches women into organization and helps them go from overwhelmed to organized. She's been on Fresh Living on Channel 2 and has been on several other of the news networks to tell women how to basically live that, organized and happy life, really, So I'm really excited to introduce Jenny to you. Jenny, thanks for being on with us.
Thank you so much. I love this audience that you're speaking to, and it's just such an honor to be able to be here with you today.
Thank you. Yeah, they are a great audience, like super amazing, amazing women. And it's such an important topic to talk about when you're dealing with, trauma and healing from trauma and betrayal trauma. And also, listeners, you'll hear my little 16-month-old girl in the background today. She's hanging out with me in office today. But so if you hear cute little babbles, she's here to give her 2 little cents into as well. So I guess you could say she's our other guest speaker.
We're just keeping it real, aren't we?
We are. We totally are. Well, when you're working from home, I mean, home life comes along with you. You know what I mean? And I know for me, and like this actually does kind of go into the whole organization thing, because I think that sometimes we end up putting us so much pressure on ourselves as moms, and then you add, the title of entrepreneur on there as well, and both of those are like so important roles, and we feel like we have to do them both just so perfectly. And the perfection, I think, is something that unravels like the organization in our lives, and then it kind of leads into more trauma. What do you think about that, Jenny?
Oh, I totally agree. One of the things that my clients will tell me a lot is I don't feel like I'm doing anything well. I feel like I'm trying to be a mom. I'm trying to manage my home. And then if you do work or you have a hobby or anything else you're trying to do outside just that basic framework of being a mom and a homemaker, they just feel like they're missing the mark on everything because they're trying to cover so many bases. And so a lot of the work that I do with women is to help them define the boundaries of what being organized and being successful looks like. And a big part of that is the coaching that I bring into the professional organizing that I do, where we really work with mindset. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said this perfectionism is such a problem. It's paralyzing. And so one of the mantras that I give my clients is done is better than perfect, because done is fun. Done is something that's
Yeah.
attainable. Perfection is not. And so if we can start to establish that kind of mindset as we're working to get more organized, we find that we can actually meet our goals and have a lot more satisfaction in what we're doing.
Oh, I love that. And it's so true because, we're all looking for satisfaction. And, with my particular group of clients, a lot of them are entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs at heart. And sometimes they don't even realize they're entrepreneurs. And so, like, when the trauma comes from like relationships or past trauma, statistics show now that, I think it's like 1 out of every 2 or 3 women, like, so almost like 50 to 75% of women are dealing with some kind of sexual abuse or sexual harassment. And like, there's just trauma all around women and children nowadays. And I've found like that's not necessarily something I personally had to deal with, which I'm so, 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 so grateful for. But I find like that trauma is like you said, something that's so debilitating. And then we feel like the only way to fix it is some sort of perfect action. And if we don't make that perfect action, then we fail, and it's just a mean cycle. And so this is, part of the reason why I've put together an organization boundary for myself is because, when I was healing from this kind of trauma and healing from, abuse from a parent and, a husband's pornography addiction and trying to be this perfect mom and all of these mindsets that were in my head, it seems like any kind of action I did wasn't good enough. You know what I mean? And one of the biggest things I realized for myself was that I didn't have to worry about that. Like, the kinder I could be to myself and the more organized I could be with just one little thing helped me feel a little bit more successful. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I love what you just said. I think you are describing kind of where we try to get to with my clients and with your clients. And that is just defining, again, what is a realistic definition of organization for you, and let's work within that rather than trying to make it look like what we see on Instagram or Pinterest, or that picture in our head of what we feel like it's supposed to look like. And so we really scale that back. I think a great framework for this discussion is one of those one-liners that I use all the time with my clients and when I speak, and that is external clutter creates internal clutter.
Oh, yes, it totally does.
And so if we break that down, I think first look at, okay, so what is clutter? Clutter is anything that doesn't serve you. And so we're trained to look at clutter as just that tangible clutter that's laying on the counter and the floor, the dishes in the sink, just the stuff around us. And definitely that is external clutter. And it's the first thing that we look at. But there's lots of different kinds of external clutter. So external clutter is anything outside of us that isn't serving us. So I look at clutter as extra commitments that aren't serving us, a really long to-do list that feels really overwhelming, other things that we're involved with, maybe the way we manage our time. And so when we don't have a good grip on these types of external clutter, it creates internal clutter.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we're on the same page with this, but just for the sake of defining this, internal clutter means anything inside your heart or in your mind. Otherwise, in other words, thoughts or feelings that aren't serving you. So this is where that negativity really starts coming in, where we feel overwhelmed. We feel really just in despair. We feel shame. We want to procrastinate. That victim-like thinking starts showing up.
Yes.
So the
Yes.
fact that external clutter creates that internal clutter is really good motivation to do something about that external clutter, particularly when your audience and your clients that you're working with have a lot of internal clutter already. I mean, having gone
Yeah.
through trauma, whether it's big T trauma, abuse and big things, or little T trauma, which could be all of us. We all have things that have been really difficult and have caused trauma. Whatever that is, we're already dealing with that internal clutter. So let's take control of what we can take control of, our exterior, our environment, certain ways that we use our time, and eliminate those sources of clutter so that we have more resources and energy to really work on that internal clutter, or those thoughts and feelings that are causing us so much trouble.
Yeah, and I think this is why organization is so huge for trauma clients, like I said. And I've kind of said this before, but it's because of that one thing you just said, the internal clutter that we get. And, I know like my clients personally, they want to live a life full of peace, joy. They want to feel like they can be who they are without any shame, without feeling like if somebody's going to come up and disapprove of them, that, oh, well, then I can't do that thing anymore. You know what I mean? And
Right.
I think we all struggle with that to some degree. And I know for me, I still worry about like the judgments of other people, but I know like the more organized I am with myself and my thoughts, especially, you know, the less I feel like I have to be ashamed for those times where life totally just trips me up and I fall in the mud on my face.
Right.
And and but I know like before I got to my healing point and really started to change my thoughts, my feelings, the way I did things, you know, just the slightest thing would totally unravel like all of my success. So what would you suggest are like some things for people that are in that point right now that are feeling like it doesn't matter what I do, it doesn't matter what I try, I just can't get any head ground?
Right. Okay. So such a great question. I think I'll share an example of a client that I'm working with right now who's just a beautiful person, going through a lot in her personal life and feeling extremely overwhelmed with so many different things, but really dismayed by her inability to be organized by the standard that she's kind of decided it needs to look like. And we talked about that a few minutes ago, that picture
Mhm.
in our head of this is what it looks like to be organized. My pantry needs to look like the Instagram pantries, and my life needs to flow really perfectly. And we've just had to scale back. I mean, when a lot of your bandwidth is going towards healing, we've got to give that attention to the healing, because
Mm.
that's what's going to make the biggest difference. However, we need to take control of what we can take control of. So we just scale back what getting organized looks like into a simple system, really, really tight boundaries that we know we can be reliable in. And so if it's okay, I'd like to take a few minutes talking about, that system that I use with her and really with all of my clients. It's kind of the first step in getting organized. And it is such a key to living an organized life. And it's realistic. You can do it because of the way that I've designed it. So if it's okay, I'd like to take a few minutes to
Oh,
describe what that is.
heavens, yes. And I would also like, to my listeners, I would say get a piece of paper and a pencil. Put this on pause for a second. We're getting ready for a Jenny Gold Nugget here. So you want to you want to write this down.
Well, that's very kind. And now I have a lot to live up to. So let's hope it's valuable. And, I do hope that something we talk about today can be helpful to your listeners. I really think about, the challenges that they're facing and the way that they're showing up with courage and facing the
Yes.
things and working so hard to heal and improve their lives. And so I do hope that what we talk about today can have even just a sliver of value to them so that it can help them along that
Oh,
journey.
absolutely. And you said something there for just a second, and I wanted to point this out. And that's that word courage. Like a lot of women that are dealing with trauma don't feel like they have that. But
Hmm.
honestly, just sticking your feet on the floor every single morning is something sometimes that's very courageous.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure, like, we really drill that in, that word in, and that, my listeners own that
Right.
because you are courageous.
Well, and I mean, this is the third time this has come up already in this episode. So I think it must be something that someone needs to hear. The
Yes.
thing that I find that my clients really fight against is that picture in their head of what they think it's supposed to look like. So they might think courage looks like someone that's just killing it and on top of everything and,
Yes.
fighting through everything and coming out on top. And courage looks like whatever that next step looks like for you that's hard to take. So if you're in the space that it's hard to get up out of bed and you do it, that's a tremendous courage. And if you're in the space that you're functioning okay, but you just are having a hard time making it to that next level, and you take that first little step with any of the things we're going to talk about today, that's courage. So I think one of the most important things we can do is really just applaud ourselves for all of the effort that we're putting forth. And as I tell my clients, we are all just on a spectrum, and it doesn't matter where we are. We're just trying to just nudge that just a little bit ahead of where we are today. So that's what courage is nudging that ahead just a little bit. So
Absolutely.
I hope that helps anyone who needs to hear that today know what a good job they're doing.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's hear these
What do we have?
these nuggets. Let's
Okay.
get into these.
Okay, so I'm going to preface what I'm going to teach you with just kind of what I call the Happy Gal way. And what that is as a professional organizer and a productivity expert, I have the strategies. Like I know what to tell you to do. But what I've found as I've worked with clients, and you'll notice in my biography, you shared that I was a professional organizer for 6, 7 years until I decided to start the Happy Gal, which is my website and my business where I now bring coaching into that. Because what I've learned is it's one thing to hand people a system, it's another thing to help them know how to implement it for themselves. And that's where the coaching piece turns in. So, what I'm going to teach you is a system that not only works because it's a good system, but because it's really designed with the intention that it is going to work with the way your brain works. And so, to be able to really explain that, I want to take just a second and talk about how when we have a hard time getting to something or being consistent or feeling discouraged and overwhelmed, it's not you, it's a brain problem. And so I like to really differentiate the difference between you and your brain. I like to look at you as you are the CEO, and your brain is like that high level, top level manager that's making the whole thing happen. And a lot of it has to do, a lot of your success has to do with your abilities as CEO. As you know what you want to see happen. You know what your vision is, but you got to sell your brain on that, because if your brain is not on the same page, then that management that's telling the rest of the employees what to do is not, that message won't get conveyed, and what you want as a CEO will not happen. And
Absolutely.
so if we can start to look at our brain, and really the best description for me when I look at the way my brain works is it's a little bit like a toddler. Yeah, it's your manager, but it's also got this toddler like quality where it wants things to be easy, or maybe even a teenager might be a good way to look at it. Your brain wants things to be easy. It wants things to be straightforward. It doesn't like long processes with no end. It wants everything to be laid out step by step really clearly. And if you reflect in your life any type of experience that you've had where you think about a time you've procrastinated or you've avoided something or you've fickled out, it's probably because the way hasn't been super clear and it's taken too long. And over time, you just cannot sell your brain on following through with that time and time again.
Yeah.
So,
And I will say that that is a really good way to explain it. Like, I love, like, the little parables and stuff that life gives you, the difference between the CEO and, your high level. That's a high level teenager, I'm saying. I just gotta say
yeah,
that. But, you're right. Like, I know for me, like, if I keep trying something over and over and over, like, my brain is the kind that's like, yeah, let's get into this. But sometimes, like, you get those roadblocks, and
right.
they totally do. They can unwind you. But the more clear you get, the better off you are. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. And so keep that in mind as we talk about this first system I'm going to give you, because the bottom line in any system I use when I'm coaching someone is it has to be something that the brain's going to jump on board with, which means it has to be simple. It has to be clear. It can't take too long. Otherwise, the brain shuts down, and it doesn't matter how good the strategy is or what I tell you or how much you want it, it will not get executed. And so this first system is something that will comply with the brain. So you ready to talk about that? I guess this is where the
Yes.
pen and paper should come in.
Yes. System number one. I
Number
am like
one. And this is the
writing this
biggest
down.
one. And we may not even move on from this one today, because this is one that I just work and work with my people on to just continually refine. And it's the concept of home base.
So, how do you feel about boundaries? It's a legitimate question. A lot of people come to me really struggling with this concept. They often feel guilty for setting boundaries, or they're not sure about even what a boundary is. You know, they've heard the term, set the boundary, things like that, but that's really confusing for them because it's not something that's well taught in our society nowadays, right? They know that boundaries are really important to having healthy, constructive, supportive, and wonderful relationships, but why? And oftentimes they also know that they feel like their boundaries are being violated, but they can't quite pinpoint what the boundary is that's being violated. That's why I've created the Clarifying and Creating Your Boundaries free PDF. You can find out what your boundaries are, how to tune in to what the boundary needs to be, and how to effectively create and communicate your boundary so that way you stay in this place that respects you, respects the other person, but also gives you the confidence in your boundaries so that way you stop being gaslighted, disrespected, and unseen. Having your boundaries really clear gives you a voice and also helps the other person stay in accountability with themselves. So that's not a role that you have to take on anymore. So if you are ready to really have clear boundaries, to really understand what your role is in the boundary, and to give yourself some safety and some protection against people that might try to gaslight you or are just being disrespectful, go grab my Creating and Clarifying Your Boundary PDF at erinandersonthetraumacoach.com. And while you're there, let's schedule a call with me. Come have a chat with me so that way I can really, really help you master this particular skill, creating boundaries, clarifying the boundary, communicating that boundary, and so that way I can also help you have relationships that show up to support you, cherish you, and love you. Ah, yes, yes, yes. I love this concept so
We've done some
much.
coaching on this. Do you want to
Yes.
make any comments on what home base is or how you feel about
You
it?
know, yeah, like home base is it was actually really interesting because, you know, I work with Jenny in helping organize my own life and my own business and a lot of different things like that. And I knew like I was doing a pretty good job with a few things, and but I knew that there was still some things that needed to be tweaking. And so one of the things I actually came to Jenny with was saying, well, I know like the center of my home, and that's what I called it, was the center, is the kitchen. It's the place, like if it's clean, the rest of the house stays fairly clean. If it's a disaster, the rest of my house is a disaster. And um I can't, like, I have to go clean it, and it takes so much more time before I can actually move on to my next task. And so when that area is disorganized, like my whole life just becomes disorganized.
You said that so well, Erin. I couldn't have said that better myself, because that's exactly how I like to describe home base. It is that area that when it's organized, you feel pretty in control. But when it's out of order, you just feel like you're unraveling and it's hard to
Yes.
focus. and get anything done. And so I'm sure listeners can relate to this a little bit. I think we all have that space in our home that feels like that. I like to call that the barometer. When it's in order, everything else feels good. Another way for me to look at that is I'll call it the cockpit of your home. It's kind of that place that you're working in and functioning out of all the time. Now, home base will look different for people, and we'll get into what home base looks like for you. It doesn't, across the board, doesn't have to be the kitchen. And there's
Yeah.
different levels of home base that we'll talk about that I think will be really helpful. But the thing that's so brilliant about home base is the fact that we are defining that boundary of what organized looks like for you on a daily, consistent basis. And we design it in a way that your brain knows exactly what it entails. Now, remember that discussion we had about the brain, how important it is to have the brain on board with what we're doing. And so if you say to your brain prior to home base, hey, you need to get organized, like we need to organize this place, or we need to clean this up, the brain's like, I don't like, what do you mean? Like, are we talking dishes? There's a bunch of mail to go through. There's that counter over there that's driving me crazy. The kids' rooms are a disaster. The bathrooms could use some work. That closet's like, what do you want me to do here? And
Yep.
so if we can look at this relationship almost as two different people, we can see why we haven't been very successful. We're not giving good, clear directions to an organ or a manager that needs to have something be very clear. And so when we define home base and say, this is the boundary of home base, and this, and this, these are the steps of what home base is, then when it's time to clean up, our brain knows exactly what to do. And we've already kind of pre-engineered this space to be the place that impacts our home the very most. So the limited amount of time that we have to clean or to organize goes to the area that is going to make the biggest difference. And I think that's one of the most brilliant things about home base.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I even want to like take it up a level here because um like home base is something like the more that I like as I've been working with you and I've been more aware of my home base, like I've noticed because like Jenny and I actually missed my call with Jenny this week, listeners, just so you know. And the reason being was because it has been a chaotic week. I mean, chaos comes in sometimes and it just lands on you. The Sunday, my son like majorly fractured his arm. It was totally displaced. It looked all awesome. All sorts of awesome except for normal. you know? And that one thing, just that one thing has totally like thrown my whole week just out of order because it totally interrupted my systems for
Right.
that day. It totally interrupted them. And even though like I still am focusing on home base and I'm trying to do things as best I can, I still have a few dishes on the counter this morning. You know what I mean? But that brings me to how I think we also have a home base sometimes in our head. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Right.
That if we want to get that home base in our home organized, I think that we need to also have the home base in our head organized because I could let this whole thing just unravel me. Or my home base is it something that I'm seriously going to beat myself up over? No. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what would help listeners is if I love where you were taking the analogy of home base and it has such broad application. And what I find is that people tend to grasp a concept when we're talking about tangible clutter really well. And then if we can kind of make that be a metaphor for the intangible clutter, like what's in your head, then that becomes a much easier thing to understand. And so I love where you were going with that. And I think let's describe what establishing home base looks like in your home. And then let's take that application to what it looks like in your head or in your business or emotionally or
Mm,
whatever wherever you need kind of that home base or that, back to normal. What does this look like for me in these different areas of my life? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. And then I'm also just made a note about the question that you asked with when we have a curveball and everything gets derailed,
Yes.
then what do we do about home base? So I
Yeah.
made a note to make sure we talk about that too, because that's such a great question. So let's talk about how to implement home base in your home to begin with.
Okay.
So the first thing I want to tell you to do is to just define what home base is. Some people need it to be their desk at work. And I think, well, that might be more of a work home base. But when in our home, a lot of times it's that cockpit, that kitchen area, maybe the into the family room. Maybe you're overwhelmed and you know that getting that entire area in shape is going to take more time than you have right now. So in that case, and with this client I was referring to earlier, we shrink that and say home base for you is this one counter. Maybe it's your kitchen island when you walk in, or that counter that you see the most. That is home base for you. And for a while, we're going to concentrate on that and just keeping that picked up. And then when you feel like you've got that under control, we'll expand to maybe the dishes or expand into kind of the walkway where the shoes and backpacks get dropped or whatever your home base is. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're listening at home and wondering what your home base is, what I'd like you to do is think about what space in your home helps you feel in control of things. And that is your home base.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
And I mentioned that earlier, and I'm saying this to my listeners right now. It's if my kitchen is a disaster, I can't go, I can't go be mom. I can't go be like all of these other hats that I wear because I have to be kitchen organizer at that moment. But if it stays clean, if it stays organized, I can go in and I can get lunches done for my kids. I can get breakfast ready the night before. I can stay on a schedule. I can stay on a routine. And, I think as people in general, we thrive on those routines, you
Absolutely.
know?
That's because
Absolutely.
the brain has that consistency and that predictability. And again, we're back to
Mm-hmm.
talking about the brain. And you can see how when we give the brain what it needs, then it cooperates really well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So
Okay.
define your home base. And then this might feel like a little bit of overkill, but I want you to humor me and do it anyway. Write down what are those steps for home base. So, what specifically do you mean? And again, we're doing this so that the brain can know exactly what you're expecting of it. So, when you say clean the kitchen, for example, are you meaning unload the dishwasher, load everything, wipe off counters, and we're done? Or for you, do you also really just have this need to like sweep the floor? And is that part of it? Or I have a stainless steel appliance in my kitchen and there's fingerprints all over it. And so for me, part of home
I
base
know
is
that.
wiping off those fingerprints because it just makes me feel gross to see fingerprints all over that stainless steel appliance. And that's just me. That might not be any of the other listeners, but you have to decide what that looks like for you. But my caution here is keep it 3 to 5 steps.
Absolutely.
Once it gets to be too long, again, the brain's overwhelmed and it checks out, and then you're going to have a really tough time being consistent with it. So, depending on where you're at on that spectrum of organization we talked about, as you select your home base, let's be realistic about what you can do in, a 15 to 20-minute session or so to get home base put back together. And if right now that can't include vacuuming the family room floor as you're doing home base, but eventually you'd like to do that, great. But for right now, we're just going to decide these are what the steps are. And then, as you mentioned earlier, having a routine around when to do it. So when am I going to do home base?
Mm-hmm.
And typically I recommend we do home base in the morning, after the kids leave or just before we leave for work or something to just start the day out with a clean slate. And then home base before you go to bed is such a must because we don't want to wake up to yesterday's disorganization. I look at that as kind of yesterday's debt. We want to pay off all our debt
Yes.
the night before
Yes.
so we wake up clean and ready to go and create a new day. We're not dealing with yesterday's stuff. So that's how
Absolutely.
we implement home base.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about like how I like what I do, because as Jenny and I have been talking, this idea of making sure I do it morning and night, it was such a simple concept. And to be honest with you, like if we think simple, we're actually starting to get more organized. So I want to put that out there, that the more complex you think, the more disorganized you usually tend to be.
Right.
In my book, that's been the case. But the first thing like I do, my step one is make sure I rinse off all the dishes that are in the sink from the breakfast that morning, and I get it in the dishwasher. Then I take a look at like any of the other areas in my house, which is usually the next step would actually be the stove top. And I make sure to clear anything that's on that stove top off and either put it away or make sure that it also goes in the dishwasher. Wipe down counters. I check my fridge because it's not, I don't have a stainless steel. I just have that white fridge, you know?
Right.
But my kids put jam fingerprints all over my fridge. And
So it
I'm
doesn't
like,
matter the color. You might need to just
no,
wipe it off.
there's fingerprints there, and I'm like, ugh, no, no, no. So I wipe that down, and then I sweep, you know. And like I said, it's just those five things. But you know, I can also say that if that feels overwhelming, because sometimes, you know, when you're dealing with trauma, life just is overwhelmed. You're
Right.
on overwhelm. So the first thing you do is rinse off the dishes and put them in the dishwasher.
Hmm.
That's
Right.
it. And start there.
Well, so what I love that you just did is you just showed how you can break down the steps for what home base will be. So I hope that was helpful to everyone listening. And again, if you need to include less steps in yours, that's fine. But that's why we want to define those things and make them so clear, is so that the brain knows exactly what you're expecting when you say home base or get organized or clean up. So
Mm-hmm.
valuable. And then when you talked about scaling this down into a smaller routine, that's what I wanted to suggest, as you talked about, well, what if I have that curveball, you know, my son breaks his arm, or everyone's running late, or I have an early appointment. The tendency of the brain is to think, oh, good, we're out of it. We're checking out. We don't have to do that.
Yeah.
And so we want a contingency plan. I call it a plan A and a plan day, or a plan B. And I'll say, maybe you're having an A day and everyone's up on time and everyone leaves and you've got the time to do it. And I hope that most days are A days for you. But there are those days where there's those curveballs. And if we allow our brain to just say, okay, we're out, we're not doing it all, we're having to dig ourselves back out of a hole, which takes more time the next day. Then we have the negative thinking start to set in, and you can see that external clutter, how that starts to breed that internal clutter, that those thoughts like to show up of, I'm never really going to be able to do this. I don't know how people get on top of this. And so we want to avoid all of that. So we just have that
Mm-hmm.
plan B for a B day, a plan C for a C day. And I've got a B day at the moment because we had this interview scheduled early and I had to get kids off to school and we had piano lessons this morning. And so my home base normally includes everything that Erin just mentioned in hers. But for me, everything got piled into the sink today and the counters were wiped off. And I'll empty the
Mm-hmm.
dishwasher later. I'll load the dishes later. But sometimes that has to happen. And what I love is that plan B allows me to look around and say, good job. You're organized.
Yeah.
You did it. And I'm not beating myself up about it or feeling like I'm never going to be able to accomplish this. That's real life, you know, and that's where
Yeah.
I love the Happy Gal way, which is that combination of coaching and professional organizing strategies that really come together in a real life sort of way that you can maintain and sustain.
See, one of the things, and I love what you're saying here, because one of the things I teach my clients is that joy is like a currency. You know, why are we spending our currency and all of it on things that we just can't manage,
Mm-hmm.
you know, for that day? And like I said, this is kind of where that organization boundary comes in for me. And I've realized that my joy is not worth spending it on the things I should or shouldn't have done, because my whole week has been B-days, right? Just that one thing has just thrown it off. Like Monday morning, we all woke up late because my son broke his arm. We didn't get home from the hospital until like 1:30 in the morning. I obviously didn't go for my walk. And so like everything like in my morning was thrown off, and it has literally followed me through the week.
Right.
But you can trade your joy and spend all of your joy on the shoulds. I should
Mm,
have, I should 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 have. And then all of a sudden you're in the negative with your joy. You know what I mean? However, if you're like, yay, I got dishes in the sink. Good job.
right.
On to next. It's okay. It's okay because home base is not going to be perfect every single day. Things happen every single day that are without that we just don't expect. And especially, if your say for instance your husband is struggling to heal from porn, and that is something that can be really heavy. Sometimes sticking dishes in the counter is all you've got the bandwidth for. But trading your joy should, like, I'm going to do a should on this one, but trading your joy is one of those things that you should not do.
Right.
And I
Right.
love that the reason, like, I love the happy gal, the logo here, because it's so true. It's so true. I mean, your joy is one of those things you do not need to trade.
Right. I love that. Yeah, I love that. And I love the way that we can fit our organizing strategies into that model that you're talking about. So be looking for
Yes.
ways that you can condense home base to be something smaller, how you can bump it back a couple of hours if you need to. A lot of times people will say, I didn't start the day off right, so the whole day's off. And I'll say, no, it's just you just bump it back a couple of hours. You look
Mm-hmm.
at maybe what else can you give up during the day so that you can just move it back, or you can condense it. And I think that's a really valuable skill set when we start talking about what does home base look like in other areas of your life. I mean, by definition, home base is you define that area that needs to be in order for you to feel like you can be at your best. And in your home, that's what we've been talking about, that cockpit, right? Like the kitchen, family room, or making your bed, whatever you feel like that is for you. What does that look like in your business? What does that look like for you spiritually? My business has been one that's had to kind of ebb and flow with family life and the pandemic and all of the
Mm-hmm.
different things that happen. And so I really had to distill it down to, at a minimum, what am I doing in my business to keep it healthy? And then that's going to be it. Right now, I'm
Yes.
not going to be necessarily growing, but what's that minimal maintenance? And for me, that was making sure I sent out a weekly newsletter. Aside from that, anything else was just a bonus. And so knowing that if I needed to prune things back to the minimum in that home base of my work gave me a lot of confidence that I still was doing a good job in my work. It was just that my energy and effort needed to go elsewhere at that time. So I love that concept. I know anybody healing from trauma probably has some spiritual practices that they're doing, because that's a work that requires
Yes.
a higher power. And we'll have, again, this picture in our head of this is what the spiritual practice needs to look like, and it takes this amount of time, and then you have those days that you just don't have it to give. So again, it's the same conversation as with our home base. So do we just let it go? Do we throw it out the window? Or do we know what that plan B is or that plan C is in a way that we can just shrink it down to maybe one verse of scripture or one quick prayer or a few affirmations or something where you're still hanging on and being consistent and maintaining the ground that you have recovered, and being okay with it
Yeah.
for that day.
And I would say that one of the things that my home base was and still is to this day, because there are days where my kitchen still like explodes. Like my kids come home from school and I've had I've been working, I've been trying to put together a project or something like that, and I come out and my clean kitchen that was really sparkling and beautiful, like, oh my gosh,
It doesn't
jam,
take
like,
long.
it's like jam on the wall, and I'm like, oh my heavens, how did that happen, But my home base, I would say, like, my core home base is is this worth my joy,
I love it.
you know and
Yeah.
it's kind of like what we said earlier, is this worth my joy? No, it's
Mm-hmm.
not. It's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And once you can kind of come back to that core principle, it kind of gives you your next step. That's
Mm-hmm.
not worth my joy. Okay, well, this looks overwhelming. I really don't want to do this. But you
Uh-huh.
know what I'm going to do? I love Mr. Bean, by the way. Like Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkinson, Mr. Bean. I love, love, love Mr. Bean. So I'll grab my phone, stick in my earbuds. I'll put my phone just kind of like in front of where I'm, like the area I'm working, and I watch Mr. Bean as I clean, so that way I'm laughing as I'm doing it. And it goes back to that concept, this is not worth my joy, so let me add to it.
Right. Right. That's such a great thing that you just brought up too, that these things that are predictable in our lives, we know the kitchen will get messy, right? We know that food is going to run out. We know that laundry is going to stack up. All these predictable things beyond home base, and this is kind of the coaching that I do beyond just this initial, home base concept, is any of these things that are predictable, if you can create a routine around them, then they can be something that is automated and easy and expected by the brain. And that is such, for me, I've learned that I like to save my brain power for problem solving, creativity, time with my kids. I don't want to use that brain power. How am I going to get the laundry done? What am I going to make for dinner tonight? And if I can design systems around those types of things that need to be done, then that becomes almost mindless, And I think what you were just talking about is you can, I don't mind my routines. Like I love to play pickleball. I'd rather be playing pickleball. I love my business and I love to coach. I'd rather be coaching, but when I have to do my laundry or when I have to do home base, I do love to put in my AirPods and listen to my favorite podcasts or call my sisters or my friends on the phone and talk. And I think that's just a way to bring some joy, like you were talking about, into these activities. And I hope that there's some hope here, some perspective that as we start to organize your life, as we start to organize your time and the tasks that you have to do and the stuff that you have, you can get into a rhythm where these types of things can be more enjoyable and they don't take the effort and the brain power that may take.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll say like those systems are really seriously one of those lifesavers, because I know for me, like, I've been coaching, healing trauma for like 10 years, but when I know when I first started this journey, like I said, when I first started this journey, the overwhelm was so major, but the more like I'm trying to like articulate what I'm trying to say, but like from where I was to where I'm at now, like I thrive on systems. And so, one of the things that I teach my clients as well is to think about like who it is you actually want to be, because a lot of times, like when I was in that space of my life does not look good. My life does not look the way I want it to. I'm in a lot of pain. I mean, that was kind of all I could see, but I knew I wanted something different. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so thinking about like, what does different look like? And again, that going back to that headspace and that brain and showing some clarity to what it is you actually want to create, I think will help you kind of start to understand what systems you want to put in place.
Right.
To help you get to help you start creating this life that you want, to help you get into creation mode. You know what
I
I
think
mean?
we're on the same page there. And one of the things I love about the work that I do is that, again, it comes back to that external clutter and the internal clutter. As we are clearing up that external clutter, we're automatically clearing up the internal clutter. But in the process, we are creating habits and discipline that can assist us to do exactly what you're talking about. Part of my work, as we are getting on top of our external world, is now to get on top of our internal world. And I am aligned with you in that, where I want to help my clients live their ideal best life. And it's interesting how the skills of eliminating that external clutter they come in so handy as you're trying to live your best life. And,
Mm-hmm.
I maybe a quote to kind of wrap up with. I had a client yesterday, and I love it when they say the things that I'm trying to teach them, and everybody thinks it sounds crazy. Routines, systems, they can get a bad rap because people can feel like I want to be spontaneous. I don't want to be trapped. I don't want to feel like I have to always be doing these things. And my client yesterday said, routines really free you to do the things you really want to do.
Yes.
And that's how I knew we were having
Yes.
a moment of success, because that is the paradigm that if we can come into, then we are in a good space. We can start to create that life we want.
Yes. And I think I also thrive a little bit on spontaneity. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, but spontaneity can also sometimes be the tripping point,
Right. It's all a
of your
balance for
yes, it
sure.
all is. And so, why not make that part of your routine? Why not put that in your schedules? Is just a time block for spontaneity. What do I want to do here? I want to go
Mm-hmm.
play with my girls for me. Or, this is a time for me to just be unabashed and like totally free to do whatever I want to do.
Right. I love it.
No holds barred. And because spontaneity, you think that that means that there's no routines and no schedules, but I think the best kind of spontaneity comes with routines and schedules because it's more of a treat.
Well, it's the yin and yang concept.
Mm-hmm.
The creativity and spontaneity is possible because of the routine, and vice versa. And balance is a big thing that I also coach on. Just finding what that balance is for you, of how much
Mm-hmm.
routine serves you, and then when does it tip into the side of I feel like I'm serving my routines. And so when can get sensitive to that balance level, then we know, kind of where we need to tweak things a little bit. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'd
So
love to. Oh, I'm sorry. Go
oh
ahead.
no, it was okay. I was just going to ask you like a couple of just really quick questions. Um, like, because I think it would really, really help just kind of anchor things in this. And we'll definitely have Jenny back, by the way, guys, for future podcasts, because we definitely have more to talk about.
Right.
We totally do. Um, but I love the idea of home base. But what was it about you, like, that you decided and you realized that organization is just something that has to be at your core? What made you create your organization boundary?
Well, I think my answer might seem a little hard to relate to for some listeners. So I am going to say that out the gate. But I want you to know I've come from a similar place as you in other ways. So I have always been an organized person. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think a lot of people want to hear that I was a train wreck and figured this out, and now you can too. But the truth is, my natural gift is organization, productivity, time management, and I just get it.
Mm,
But what I had to fight for was the coaching piece. So yeah, my external world was pretty good, but my internal world was suffering. So I had to learn how to slow down. I had to learn how to be more present. I had to learn how to be still and to become thoughtful and mindful and understand how the brain works. And when I was able to understand that, then I knew how to teach organization to other people. So I
mm,
get it. I know that feeling of I'm never going to be able to then, fill in the blank.
XYZ,
I
right?
just don't know if it's possible for me to fill in the blank, because
XYZ.
I've been in that space. But the advantage I have is that being organized is such a gift for me, where it's just, I know the things to do, but now I know how to relate to people that don't feel organized. And I know how to teach that really well, because I've had to fight so hard for other aspects of my life where I felt hopeless and in despair. So
Yes.
that's how I've come to the place I'm at.
But Jenny, I think another way that people can relate to that is saying my natural gift. See, my natural gift is teaching.
Hmm.
My natural gift is wisdom and intuition. Like those are things that are just come very natural to me, and I use those big time in my business, right? My gut will tell me something, and I will say that, and it's like, oh, yeah, that's what we're dealing with, right? And the thing is, I love that organization is actually your natural gift, and it, like, listeners can actually relate to that because I think that's something to be aware of, what our natural gifts are, especially when we're trying to become organized. Because we know that those are rungs, those are stepping stones to creation.
Right. Right. And I guess what I will say is because I have had to fight for progress and growth in other areas of my life, I know what that process looks like. And so, as other people might be fighting to get organized, I have that objectivity to be able to say, I know where you're at right now, and I know you can get there because I've been able to get there in
Exactly.
other areas. And I think that's really important to recognize too, is that one of the things I tell my clients is success is a formula and it happens step by step. And so
Mm.
when we start trying to skip all the steps, that's when we get overwhelmed and we fall off the wagon. And I know that because of my own journey that I've had to fight for things
Same
for.
here.
And now that I know all the steps of the organizing, I can pull them right back into the step that they're in and help them see what that next step is to take. And it just seems to be just a formula that really helps people make not just a little bit of progress, but like permanent change. And that's the thing that I love with my clients is they'll say, I don't know, this is working. Nothing's ever worked before. And I know it's just that combination of that really good organizing strategy with that coaching. It's got to
Absolutely.
be both coming from both places.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. I love it. I want to ask you one more question, and especially where, we talk a lot about, trauma and healing from trauma here. Have you ever come across a time in your life where being organized has helped you actually work through a trauma?
Oh, absolutely. When I first got into coaching, I was in a program that was helping me kind of heal from something else. And I just noticed I was doing it so well. I mean, the content itself was not easy, but my success with the content was I was really a standout from the other students. And that's actually when I started the Happy Gal, because I realized that it was my organization skills that were allowing me to follow through and be disciplined and be able to stick to what they were telling us to do. And so, absolutely, any organizing skills you have and any that you can gain are going to absolutely help you with anything that you're working on in life. In fact, my clients come to me to get organized, but it's not long before we're looking at all sorts of areas of their lives that they want to get organized. And we're not just talking about their home, because these principles that I teach have application all across the board.
Exactly. And I'm sitting here thinking, I feel like I do a pretty good job, like, in my house. But, like, one of the things I'm working on right now is reorganizing my business, And so I'm like, maybe this is something we're going to talk about next time,
Get some future sessions.
Get some thoughts about going on like that.
Yeah.
So, Jenny, thank you so much for hanging out with us today on the other side of the struggle. It was such a fantastic fantastic discussion, and I know, like, it's not a hope, I know that my clients are going to love this content and understand that, you know the like I talk about, like, like, four main boundaries, and the organization boundary really really is the one I feel that um kind of catches everything, you know what I mean, all
Mm-hmm.
the other boundaries. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope it's helpful. And I think what we've talked about today gets your foot in the door and gives you something to think about. And I would just mention that if the home based concept is really intriguing to you and you want to learn more, I have a Get Organized boot camp. It's an online program, it's self paced. And it really gets into what I call kind of the 3 pillars of getting organized, and home base is one of those. And so that's a great resource if that's something you want to learn more about. A lot of really good information in that. So, and then there's another option. I do have an option called Clutter Busters. It's just a free 3-day program that helps you start to get on top of your clutter right in your home. 10 minutes a day, it tremendous results, low level commitment. And so that's another really great option. So in your show notes, maybe we can include those links. So if people
I'd
want
love to, yes.
more, they can either look at boot camp or they can look at Clutter Busters, and either place would be a great place to start.
Love it. Love it. Yes, I definitely will add those into the show notes as well. So go check out thehappygal.com, guys, if you want to chat more with Jenny and get to know her better and to start taking some of her teachings into your life to help you get organized enough to start healing from some of your traumas as well. So thank you so much, Jenny, for hanging out with us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for the invitation.
Okay. Talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Hey guys, thanks so much for hanging out with me today and listening in on this podcasting episode. Don't forget to tune in next week. It's going to